Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Lizzie, and for today's video, we are talking about Firestarter, both the original and the 2022 versions we'll be talking about today. I am super excited. This is actually my first time having watched either of these films. I had just been scrolling through Netflix when I saw that the original one was on there, so if you have a Netflix account, should be able to watch it on there. And then I decided that, hell, since I watched that one, might as well watch the most recent one as well. So for this video in particular, we're just going to be kind of talking about some of the differences. I'm not going to be deep diving too much on either of these films individually, but if you do want to see that kind of content, you can actually head on over to my Patreon and check out there, where I have done so with both of these films. I gave full reviews, opinions on them as individual films, trying too much not to compare the two. So make sure you go ahead and check that out. But for this one, like I said, we're just going to be mainly focusing on kind of my thoughts of them in comparison. So again, first time sitting down to watch these ones, I just ended up watching them back to back. I will say I very much enjoyed both of these films. I was surprised at the fact that I hadn't seen the original yet, because I love Drew Barrymore, and generally enjoy Stephen King as well. So the fact that I hadn't seen that one, I think it just had not come across my peripheral. Like, I obviously knew of the film, but it just hadn't popped up on any streaming services. I never really went out of my way to find it to watch, because it was on Netflix, decided to watch it. So I love it. I understand why this film is a cult classic, why it's so like highly honored, I guess, amongst horror fans, and even I feel like non-horror fans. Like, people know this film, and it's definitely understandable why. It's a very intense, kind of sad story, and a little bit terrifying. Obviously, you have a small child in Drew Barrymore's character who is, dealing with these powers that she doesn't know how to control, and her family, who is just kind of trying to help her manage those feelings and having these, emotions of like a little girl that you also can't control. I feel like when we talk about films like Carrie, which, kind of similar, or even Ginger Snaps, where the underlining story of a female character like going through a period or puberty, this is a little girl who's not quite there, but it's almost like the physical development of her emotions happening in front of your eyes, and it's very intense. I definitely did not expect kind of some of the scenes and as much, I guess, death in the original one as there was. As for the 2022 version, definitely a little bit less. There's definitely some intense emotional scenes. Again, still using the fire as a physical representation of this young girl's emotions, but not as many people are set on fire. Definitely still like a lot of people, but I feel like this one was a little bit less graphic than the 80s versions, than the 80s version. And notice how I'm saying versions, because whenever we have something that has an original source material, like the fact that this is based off of a Stephen King novel, I don't like to say remake. I do the same thing with it. I like the original. I very much, maybe unpopular opinion, but more so enjoy the 2000s versions of it as well. If you know me, if you're not new here, you know that that is another one of my absolute favorites. You can't see right now, but I have a tattoo for that. So I always hate to say remake when it has an original source material other than the film that predecesses it. So that is why I'm not referring to it as a remake. I definitely don't feel like it's a remake. I feel like it stands out as its own film, which is maybe why I was able to enjoy it so much. Even having watched them back to back, I was able to view them as separate films and enjoy them that way. Now, I do know that this one, the 2022 version, has very low ratings on Letterboxd. It's got a 1.7. A lot of you that I follow were not big fans of this one, and that's okay. Everybody's entitled to their own opinion. Now, granted, the original, the 1980 version, isn't rated a whole lot more higher. It's 2.9, which I think surprised me just because of how much I've heard about this film over time. I expected it to have a bit of a higher rating, but I will say the people that I follow definitely rated this one higher than the 2022 version, which again doesn't really truly surprise me too much. And obviously, like I said, we're going to talk about some of the differences that I noted. Firstly, just the way that this film opens, really the whole way that the story is told. And I guess I should have also said that I have not read the novel. If you're not new to my channel, you know I'm not a big reader. I had thought about it. I had thought about maybe pausing on reviewing these and reading the book, but I just know it would take me far too long to read the book before being able to get to reviewing it. That is something that I brought up maybe doing for my Patreons, is actually reading the freaking book, and maybe that would have been a better way to compare these, because it would have been nice to know how accurate they are. So if you have read the book, if you're a fan of the novel, let me know how either of these compare. But just the way that this film opens, the 1984 version opens with this chase scene between Andy and Charlie and what we later on figure out are government agents. The 2022 version actually opens with a scene that is mentioned but never shown in the original, which I think is really cool. A scene of Andy and his wife Victoria in their home with Charlie as an infant. They're putting her to bed, and afterwards she sets some things on fire. We're then shown Andy waking up, so it's shown as a dream, but is obviously a memory that he has of when Charlie was an infant. So those are obviously very different openings, and that's when I kind of knew that this film was going to be that these two films were going to be very different, because throughout the majority of the original, it is them pretty much running from these government agents who are the ones responsible for this experiment. They're the reason why Charlie is the way that she is, that her parents are the way that they are. If you don't know, if you haven't seen either film, both parents have abilities of their own due to a governmental experiment that they joined while in college. Met each other there, fell in love, had Charlie. She has powers. She has both powers from her parents and her own, which is the Firestarter power. And the 2022 version, we open the film with them really generally living pretty normal lives. I think I mentioned that Charlie is pretty well in control of her powers, which is very much different than the original one, where she appears to be much younger. That was something else I noted, is that she appears to be quite younger in the original, which I think worked for the way that the film is set, and just how Charlie is, and I think definitely adds its own element of terrifying because she is so young and unable to control these powers. But in the retelling, Charlie, like I said, she is generally in control of her powers, but she has started to kind of lose control of them. She's getting older, not like a lot older, but she's getting older. She's experiencing bullying at school, which seems to be kind of the main trigger that sets off Her inability to no longer control her powers is every time she gets angry, that's what sets it off, which isn't much different than from the original. It just plays out very differently because when we meet her, she's been pretty well in control of her powers. Her dad is very much pushes her to be able to just kind of push them down. He really doesn't want her to face the fact that she has these powers or deals with him. He wants her to just be able to shut them down, whereas her mom would much rather her be able to control them, especially as she's getting older and she's having these incidents. She knows that eventually, if they just let it continue, she's not going to be able to control her powers, which she needs to be able to do, but her dad just wants her to completely shut them down. Something else that was interesting that they changed between these two films is that in the retelling, I'll call it, Andy, the dad, already has powers prior to this experiment. He tells these government agents of a time where he saw his parents die, and they're like, well, what's so like kind of odd about that? And he's like, I saw it a week before it happened. So he already has these powers before going into the experiment, whereas in the original, all of those who develop powers was brought on by the experiment. Just like Victoria is someone who her powers in both were brought on by the experiment. There was just that slight kind of change, which is why it seems like Andy's powers are a bit more stronger, so he can mind control. He can make people do what he wants, but it's not so simple in either version of the film. He kind of has these brain hemorrhages, say that right? When he does it, causes, in the original causes nose bleeding, in the retelling causes eye bleeding. Again, if you've read the book, let me know what it does in the book, if anything. And that was like a little bit of a change in there. So that's another moment that's kind of comes off a little bit cheesy in the retelling at times. It's the eye bleeding, but it's still like pretty freaky and cool. And it's understandable that Andy does not want that future for Charlie, but it's made very obvious that she is much stronger than both of her parents. Her mom has telekinetic powers, kind of like Carrie, where she can like move things, throw things around the room with her mind, but her powers are a bit less strong than, say, Andy's powers of mind control. One thing I was not a big fan of in this film is, so we have the character of Rainbird return. In the original, he works for the government. It's just this like creepy guy. I kind of kept waiting for his like pervy moment in the original, and for Charlie to like set him on fire for being a creep, because he was just being too pervy behavior. But he wanted to like end Charlie, kill her, end the whole experiment. In the retelling, he is someone that has powers. He is someone, he says to Victoria at one point, like, before you, like, college kids showed up, like, they had to experiment on someone. I believe he's an indigenous person, which totally, like, culturally, especially in America, makes sense for his character to be played like that. That the people of color in this film are the bad guys, because also the actress that plays the captain in the retelling, she's black. But anyway, at least there are people of color in this film, but even if they're the bad guys, but it's much better. But like I said, he is also someone that has powers that is sent to retrieve Charlie, so to speak. And at the end of the film, spoiler, I guess this whole thing is spoiler anyway, he takes Charlie. Like, she has killed all these government people, including her father, that's something that they didn't change, is that the dad dies in both of these. In the original, he dies by being shot, and just bleeding out, which was not just bleeding out, but bleeding out, which was sad. In the retelling, Charlie is he forces Charlie, he mind controls Charlie and forces her to kill him in order to save herself, which again, both very heartbreaking, and I was very much wondering if they were gonna kill him off in the retelling or not. I wasn't quite sure if they were going to, and they did. And I like the way that they did it. I mean, in both, he sacrifices himself to protect Charlie. And so he ends up, but Charlie ends up, burning everything down. In both versions, she burns everything down. But in the retelling, she ends up letting Rainbird live. He kind of like bows and like surrenders to her almost, and she like walks away from him and is just like on this beach, and then he pops up next to her and they don't say anything. We don't even hear them say anything. I kind of maybe figure they say like some share a moment like telepathically, that we just don't hear, even though we hear other telepathic conversations Charlie has throughout the film. But maybe they just share their own little moment, and he like picks her up and carries her off as if she went to go like live with him. And I was like, I get it, like I get having a character that has these powers being sent to take care of Charlie. That makes sense. But he literally killed her mom, and not like accidentally killed her, like he full on like killed her mom. And I'm like, are we just gonna like forget that happened? Like, what? It just doesn't really make sense. So that was just kind of a part in the retelling that I wasn't quite a fan of, but I did enjoy the way that both of these films ended, and I did enjoy both of them. Like I said, I was able to separate them and enjoy them as individual films, which I think is really just important when it comes to films like these, especially again when you have two separate films based off of a different source material and it's not a remake. I think it's important to give that film its own chance to stand out individually. So I hope that you guys did enjoy this comparison. Let me know your thoughts on both of these films individually, compare, whatever. Let me know your thoughts definitely compared to the book, like I said, if you have read it, and I hope that you did enjoy this. If you did, please do give it a big old thumbs up. Make sure you hit the subscribe button for more spooky and horror related content. A quick shout out to my Patreons. Thank you guys so much for helping to contribute to the channel. And like I said, if you want to see me review these films individually, head on over there. There's a link in the description below along with all of my social media, and I'll see you all again later with another video.